Welcome back to Benny's Custom Works, proudly supported by Sparesbox. And for the first time, we're stoked to announce Valvoline's just come on as a channel partner. We're really excited to have those guys on board. They're a long-standing oil supplier and manufacturer. Those guys have been around forever, and yeah, we're stoked to have such an established brand involved with the channel. Today, we're back on the IS200. We're going to be doing some performance upgrades again. So we've basically got a good baseline of the Supercharger kit, the stage 1 kit from rank 1, which has the smaller pulley and a returnless fuel. It still retains the OEM returnless fuel system. So today what we're going to do is fit a return style fuel system with a vacuum reference fuel reg. We're also going to be doing the bigger pulley. We're going to be doing bigger injectors again, because part of that conversion that we're doing today is we're going to go from 98 to E85. We've also got some secondhand headers there. We're going to do a bit of a side-by-side comparison between the headers and the factory headers. And after that, we're just going to do a quick oil change, because the oil in this has done a couple of track days now. And also going from 98 to E85, there'll be different basically chemicals left in the oil, similar to what we talked about in the Mustang. You leave those sort of chemicals in the oil for a while, they can break down and damage components in the engine. So we're always doing lots of oil changes in stuff. So we're going to be doing an oil change again today. We'll probably do that towards the end of it, because obviously you want to heat the engine up and get it warm so that all the byproducts hopefully come out of the engine before you go putting your fresh oil in. So that's enough talking. We've got tons to do today. It doesn't look like we're going to have a lot on, but there's a lot of stuff to do to pull stuff apart. So the Supercharger kit actually has to come off to fit the extractors. We've got to pull the radiator out to change the drive pulley for the blower as well. So there's all sorts of gear we've got to do. There's going to be plenty to see. Let's get into it. On a lot of vehicles, especially inline 6-cylinder cars, you may have to drop the steering knuckle off to actually get the factory and or the aftermarket exhaust manifold or headers back into the car. A really good idea, if your wheel alignment's already good, to just mark that steering knuckle. So the way I've done that is basically pull the steering knuckle halfway up the shaft, and I'm just going to mark it with the trusty old pink paint pen. Then that'll basically mean we put it back in the same spot. Then we're pretty much good to go. Got these headers on the bench now. I've just had a quick look at them, and most of the oxygen sensor bungs are stripped. Worst case, if we can't repair the threads in these bungs, we can just weld in some new ones. Haltech do actually supply a weld-on kit. So basically comes with the weld-on bung and a plug, as well as a cross washer. So nice little handy kit. We'll make sure we link that part number in the description. We've got our headers back on the car now, so we're back to the point where we're about to reinstall the supercharger. The one difference we are going to make with the supercharger side of it is we're changing this pulley. So this bolts to the front of the water pump and sends the drive to the supercharger. So this was our existing one, which I think from memory is 150mm OD. And this is our new rank 1 upgraded pulley. So this is the 165mm version. This is basically as big as you can physically put in there, because right here is where the crank pulley sits. So you can't actually make the OD of this any bigger before it's going to hit the crank pulley. So this should give us a few more PSI boost. So it'll be interesting to see back-to-back dyno runs of what this made versus what this is going to make. We are going to go back to Haltech and retune this on their dyno. Obviously, it's not going to be a direct comparison only between these two. We are also going to go to E85 and, as I mentioned, a return style fuel system with vacuum reference for the fuel pressure regulator as well. So we'll throw this on, put the supercharger back on, then we can get into our fuel system upgrade. We're at the point now where we're going to start the E85 conversion. So the first thing we need to do is actually remove all of the petrol out of the tank. Unfortunately for me, the tank's pretty much dead full. So a quick way for us to be able to pump that out is actually fit the return style fuel reg into the rail. And we're just going to actually run this return hose rather than to the tank. We're just going to run it into a jerry can because that's just going to be the simplest way. And I've also removed the fuel pump relay, which we actually installed previously when we did the Haltech fit. So we're just going to bridge that relay out so that the pump will just run continuously until it's actually pumped the tank out. Then, as usual, we're going to put about 5 litres of E85 into the tank. Then we're going to actually start the car up and let it pump it through the return line and let it run out. It'll probably stall pretty quickly because obviously the injectors are going to be a fair bit too small for the E85 demand. But hopefully that'll allow us to pump the system out completely. Then we can just set it all up and basically continue with the E85 conversion. This is going to be our return line. The rubber is going to run the whole way from front to back. Normally I'd recommend to do it in hardline if it's a street car, but for a track car we're going to actually cable tie it up. This is a bit of a stopgap. Further down the line I'll probably replace it with a correct hardline, but time isn't really going to permit for that today, so we'll basically get this whole thing in and set up. We'll try and get this thing tuned as quickly as possible as well, so possibly post-tune we'll replace this rubber line with some hard line. But let's keep chipping away. we've got to the point now where we've got all of our Raceworks E85 injectors in. They're a direct fit as far as the rail goes. You don't need any spacers or adapters. However, they run an EV1 Bosch style connector, so they've also supplied us these super neat little patch harnesses. I mean, for this particular car, I could have just as easily cut off the factory connectors and fitted the EV1 style connector directly to the loom. However, these are designed so that if you're modifying your street car and you want to revert back to OEM later, you literally just remove that and then you fit your standard injectors straight back in. But yeah, it's a nice little addition that means you don't have to go cutting up a loom. It also means you don't need crimping pliers if you don't have them. So it's one less thing that you need, and it means it's an easier DIY installation. I don't know if we've mentioned yet, but we've also got our little adapter back in the rail now for our fuel pressure regulator. I did momentarily remove it and just fit the fuel damper again so we could pressurize the rail and check for leaks before we do a final assembly. It is pretty crucial that you check your rail for pressure, but that it holds pressure basically, and you don't have fuel leaks before you fit everything up. This car is not too bad to fit stuff back together. However, some Subarus particularly can be quite tedious to have to pull the rails back out and replace or reseat injectors. So yeah, I'd highly recommend basically just bolt the rail back up and just do your pressure test before you refit all of your external parts, because you can be potentially pulling stuff apart 2 or 3 times before you get those injectors seated correctly. So, but yeah, that's going to get us done. We're going to do our final fit, then we'll run our return line from the front to the back. Once that's run, we'll then swap in our return style fuel hat, which was going to mean changing the fuel pump over, but should be pretty much back together. And we also now finally have E85 at the rail, so it should run okay, well enough to get it on the trailer and get it to the dyno or to Haltech so we can tune it. But yeah, everything's coming up pretty well, and hopefully we see sort of a pretty good power gain. Hopefully 30 kilowatts would be nice with the pulley upgrade and the 85, but we'll have to see what we come up with. Come to the point now where we're tearing down our original fuel pump module, basically to harvest our Raceworks pump that we were running in it already. That's E85 compatible, so we're just going to transfer that straight across. The other things that we do need to get out of our existing module, well, for our particular setup, was the wiring for the fuel pump, because we had to modify that to fit the Raceworks pump. But more importantly, we also need this jet pump. So because this is basically a hump tank or a saddle tank, which basically means there's 2 low points in the tank and the tail shaft runs through the middle. This what's called a jet pump basically siphons from the driver's side of the tank to the passenger side of the tank using the suction or the fuel flow from the return side of the reg. Because this obviously had a deadhead system, which means there's a reg in the tank, this was all sort of set up as part of the reg, but now we're going to have to cut that off, which I've just done, and plumb that into the return hose, which is this hose here. So that will then go onto our jet pump, and will mean that we'll still be able to use both sides of the fuel tank effectively. So we'll throw this thing together, get it back in the tank. Then all we're gonna do is run our return line, and it should be happy days. Runs. Not well, but it runs. the whole fuel system's now in the car. We've got E85 in it. The last thing to do before we actually go to fire it and leave it to run properly is to scale the injectors. However, this is a bit of a shortcut which I've come up with. I don't know if it's 100% correct, but it seems to work okay to get it to a tuner. I highly would not recommend doing this for running it on the street or driving it under load or any kind of power runs. But what I've done, because Scotty, the tune that Scotty's put in this is obviously based on a petrol and also based on smaller injectors. So the injectors we've fitted are 850cc. So, but what I've done to kind of compensate for the E85 is reduce the overall flow of those injectors to 510cc. That's about 60% of 850, which hopefully by my crazy maths will mean that it will run a lot more happily on E85 until we tune it. Like I said, can't stress it enough, this is not for driving around, doing track days, doing any kind of load testing or driving or performance type runs. It's literally just so we can move it in and out of the shop without having burning eyes because it's pumping out 40% more fuel than it actually needs. So yeah, fingers crossed this works. We're going to give it a bit of a start and see how it runs. But yeah, like I said, we've basically scaled these injectors to 510 even though they're 850s, and we'll see how we go. Must have done something half right. It's definitely got an exhaust leak though. Well, that's us done for the day. We've got our entire fuel system done. So that's comprised of some Raceworks 850cc injectors, the Rank 1 full return fuel system, and we've also got some secondhand China Bay exhaust manifold on there, and also the Rank 1 bigger blower pulley. So all in all, I hope we pick up sort of a 10 to 20 sort of kilowatt bare minimum, but I'm hoping for 30. It should sort of wake it up a fair bit, I reckon. Next time you see this, we'll be at Haltech on the dyno, and hopefully we'll be making some power. Thanks as always to Sparesbox. Don't forget BCW5 on checkout. Also thanks to Rank 1 for supplying all the bits that we've used today that were IS200 specific. And also thanks to Valvoline for coming on board. Thanks for watching guys, and we'll see you next time.